thank you for joining me.
That's good to see you.
Dr. Patti. You are Assistant Professor of Communication here, and you are the affiliate faculty member for Campus Center for the Judaic Holocaust and Peace Studies, and you're also an advisor for the Zen Meditation Club and an unsweet tea enthusiast.
Yes.
So tell me about how you came to be a practicer of Zen.
I was always fascinated since I was a kid with this thing that we called meditation, and like as a kid I just had the same sort of misnomers that most people have about meditation, like it's astral traveling and you're like sort of, I just had all these really esoteric thoughts, but it just seemed, I was fascinated by the idea of like, what is this meditation? So as a kid I would like sort of, without having really any idea except for what I'd seen in movies, like sort of just think about meditation and think about not thinking and what is this, and it just perplexed me and fascinated me. And so as you know, I'm also an overthinker and very active mind, and so I also had a ton of anxiety growing up. And so by the time I was freshman, sophomore in college, so 2000, 2001, 2002, the anxiety was getting the better of me, and I wasn't able to function, just was, just not in a happy place, really stressed out. My body was reacting in really weird ways. And then there was a class at Cal State Long Beach on Buddhism, and it was taught by like a leading American Buddhist scholar, and I took that class, and that's when everything kind of clicked for me. So I, began to read about Zen and sort of actually understand what Zen and mindfulness meditation really were. And so I started practicing it religiously, although I'm agnostic, but I mean like kind of every day I just started practicing like maybe 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day. And I learned how to practice. So just that the same stuff that I do in the Zen Club is kind of what I realized. Like I finally sort of understood meditation, that it's anything that tunes you into the present moment, and regardless of what's going on in your head, it's not about getting rid of these thoughts, it's just about hanging out in the present moment regardless of what's going on. So I learned how to practice in that class through learning all these Zen Buddhist terms. So that was the start of it. My good friend Justin Malik got into it separately at the same exact time through a guy named Bernie McGrain, if you remember from the interpersonal class. He was a student of McGrain's at Chapman University, so he and I were getting into it, and we both realized, oh, you get it and I get it, and everybody's talking about this thing, but nobody really knows how to practice. And so just kind of, we were in a band together at the same time, and it just took on a life of its own, and been practicing ever since, just meditation. One thing that first Buddhist teacher I had said is, if you meditate for 30 minutes a day for 6 months, nothing will mess with you. And I didn't get that at the time, but I sort of believed it. And what it taught me is, if you can sit there in meditation, it's not a relief from whatever's going on in your life. It is being kind of graceful and okay with what is going on, regardless of how crazy it is. So being able to be calm while things are chaotic. That, like, all my anxiety didn't go away, but it transformed. I realized that, this anxiety is the opposite side of being a sensitive, in touch person, and if you're intelligent, there's a lot of things to be afraid of, there's a lot of things to be, life is uncertain. And so I just realized, oh, this is part of being awake, part of my like sort of awakened state. And then that helped me as a performer, as a musician. I was able to kind of face those fears, embrace that, and that anxiety turned into a whole lot of energy and passion, and like wanting to practice as much as I could, so that when I was on stage I could perform the way I wanted to. And then as I was sort of maturing and getting a hold of myself because of this meditation practice, and like being a lot less of a perfectionist, a lot less of just kind of putting all this crazy pressure on myself, things started to open up in my life. I applied to graduate school, started teaching my first public speaking class. I went from where you are, so like finishing my undergrad degree one summer, then taught my first public speaking class. And because I had 3 or 4 or 5 years of meditation, like that first class, it was more fun than being on stage. I was so nervous, but I was like this excitement, and everything else is history.
I didn't realize you started so young with your whole
about the same time you learned about it, in terms of our age, right? So.
Oh, so when you say kid, you mean like 21-year-old?
Oh, well, no, like as like maybe like a 3rd grader. I was just thinking about it, but I wasn't practicing. It was just fascinating to me. It just was like, you know, you see samurai movies and you see all this, like meditation is all, it was, you know, even when I was a kid, it's just this thing, this sort of thing that you hear about, and I just wanted to know more about it since I was little, but I didn't actually know what it was or really practice it until I was maybe 19 or 20 or something like that.
Fascinating. So
Yeah.
truly a lifetime of curiosity about Zen. Pretty
Yeah,
much.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
So for those of us who aren't Zen masters or even Zen practitioners, what would the basic, like no strings attached form or technique that would be used to meditate?
The thing that differentiates Zen from other forms of Buddhism is that it is focused on the art of sitting. Zen is the art of sitting. There's a book I could give you called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, that just talks about, on Zen practice, right? So you notice there's a little meditation cushion. It's just the art of sitting. So for most other types of Buddhism, there's a lot of religious sort of, and for Zen too, there's a lot of religious kind of background to it, but ultimately, from Zen Buddhism, it's the same thing as mindfulness meditation. Mindfulness meditation kind of comes from the Zen Buddhist tradition, which is just that practice of meditation itself, the practice of sitting. So the easiest way to describe it, Yungin Rinpoche has the easiest way to describe it, and I think I passed this on to you, John Kabat-Zinn as well, but in class there's like a 1 minute and 30-second like HuffPost video of this like young Zen guy talking about, like, there's 2 steps. Step 1, anchor your awareness to something in the present moment. That's step 1. Could be drinking tea, could be a glass of wine, could be running, could be breathing is the commonest one, right? So step 1, feature in the center of your awareness something that's happening in the present moment. So the breath is always there, we very rarely pay attention to it, so you can always come back to it. It's still now. You can kind of tune into that regardless of what else is going on. Not to block out what else is going on, but to feature, step 1, feature the breath in the center of your awareness, just for no reason, not to relax, but just intentionally coming back to the present moment. Step 2 is where the real practice begins. Step 2 is when the mind inevitably wanders, which it does. We're a thinking animal. The mind is always bubbling up with conscious and semi-conscious and unconscious. It's just this infinite flows of thoughts and stuff going on. So step 2 is, as soon as you try to do step 1, the mind starts to run its own games, and that's okay. You learn to notice these things, and as soon as you realize that you've drifted far away from step 1, paying attention to the breath in the present moment, there's a moment of realization. And whether it's happy thoughts, bad thoughts, banal thoughts, insightful thoughts, whatever kinds of thoughts they are, you notice them and you say, thinking, it's all thinking, and then back to step 1, 2-step process. Anchor your awareness to something in the present moment. When you inevitably get distracted, that's fine, you're not a bad meditator, you notice it and you say thinking, back to step 1. That's the practice.
Well, that sounds easy enough for beginners to follow.
Simple but not easy is how I like to think of it. Simple but not easy. It is one of the, why does it make you better at everything in your life? Why does it make us, as Pema Chodron says, we don't sit in meditation to be good at sitting. We sit in meditation to be more awake in the everyday chaos of our lives. It is no vacation from our stresses or problems. It is becoming intimately familiar and befriending what is actually our experience, and doing that over and over and over again. So it's a really, really hard thing to do.
Would you pin that as a common misconception, people thinking that their stresses and troubles are just going to go away?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's overly romanticized today as like meditation is about blocking out your stress, or it's not just about being all chill or all relaxed or all, none of that stuff. It's just those 2-step processes. The byproduct of that, and there's thousands of empirical research studies, mostly in neuroscience and psychology, the byproduct of this practice is greater wisdom, happiness, and love. This comes from a book called The Buddha's Brain, right here. Neuroscientists and psychologists talking about the byproduct of meditation, but meditation is a lot like vegetables. And for some people, vegetables are hard to eat, right? Just knowing vegetables are good for you isn't enough. Just knowing meditation is eventually good for you isn't enough. You have to eat the vegetables on a regular basis. You have to practice on a regular basis. And it's this habit of present awareness that you end up ingraining in your brain, which leads to just actually being there for the moments of your life, these brief moments that we have. If we're lucky to live 80 years, it's still not very much time. So it's just being able to be awake and present regardless of what's going on in your life. That sort of, you train that intentional capacity of actually being there, as opposed to being lost in our thoughts about our lives. A lost in the kind of daydream haze of like worrying about what's going to happen after I graduate, what's going to happen after this, how am I going to edit this thing together, all that stuff. Just actually letting that stuff be there, but actually being in the present moment is a skill, especially today. Pausing on purpose is a very rare thing to do. We fill up our lives, every moment of our lives, and we don't allow ourselves to get bored. Meditation is intimacy with extreme boredom, intimacy with doing nothing on purpose, and doing that, the mind naturally settles itself, and then you can get done much more than you would if you were just running around in the kind of half-baked way that most of us do.
Undoubtedly. So, as my last wrap-up question, how do you tie in your Zen practices with your everyday life?
To me, that they are one and the same. And so the mindfulness meditation and Zen meditation kind of help me to crack open my consciousness to a more sacred way of viewing every moment of my life in the profanity and in the mendacity of everyday life. So we're both really busy today. We have a million things to get done. It's the middle of the semester, tail end of the semester. I don't want to just get bowled over by all these to-do lists. So for me, meditation, there's a formal aspect of it, which is seated meditation, but then that gives you the capacity to see every moment as a moment to wake up, to come back to the present moment, to figure out exactly where you are, exactly what you need to do right now. That's all we can ever do, is what we can do right now. So the more I've done it, the more I can sort of live in a state of being present in my everyday life, and just that's what John Kabat-Zinn calls mindfulness meditation in everyday life. So every time I walk through a door, that's a moment to wake up. Every time somebody comes in and I've got a million things on my mind, it was so nice to have to send all those emails before this, but now I get to turn the computer off. I put it on sleep mode, so I don't have to worry about that. All I have to worry about is this. That's kind of meditation too.
Well, that sounds easy enough, but I guess that's the trick, because it sounds easy, and then you try it in real life, and it's a bit more difficult.
Oh yeah, and there's no end to practice. Things constantly bowl us over. I think one of the other misnomers, as a way to kind of wrap things up, is that people just think, oh, okay, I know about meditation, so I'm going to use it when things get stressful, when the waves come, when the proverbial shit hits the fan. The problem is, by that point, it's too late. So you kind of build up this capacity to be present, so that when these big waves come, you can surf them much more gracefully. You can't just call on it right at that moment. You have to have a lot of practice to be able to surf these big waves. So, that would be one of the lessons.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Chris Patti.
Anytime.